Nakor, fake HOA cops accused black man of loitering. He was a state senator. The golden hues of dawn bathed the pristine streets of Crestwood Pines, a gated community where every lawn was a testament to meticulous care, and every house gleamed with the promise of suburban perfection. At the edge of this manicured enclave stood a modest two-story home, its porch adorned with a single rocking chair and a small garden of native wildflowers. This was the retreat of State Senator Jeremiah Ellis, a 52-year-old black man whose life had been shaped by service, resilience, and an unshakable commitment to justice. Elected 3 terms ago, Jeremiah was a respected figure in the state capitol, known for his eloquence on the Senate floor and his tireless advocacy for marginalized communities. But in Crestwood Pines, he was just another neighbor, and to some, an outsider. Jeremiah had bought the house 2 years ago as a weekend escape from the hustle of city life. His weekdays were spent in legislative sessions, community forums, and late-night policy meetings, but weekends were sacred. He'd drive to Crestwood Pines, trade his tailored suits for jeans and a sweater, and lose himself in the quiet of his garden or the pages of a history book. His presence in the neighborhood was understated. He waved to joggers, nodded at dog walkers, but kept to himself, savoring the solitude. Yet his dark skin, his unassuming car, and his refusal to conform to the neighborhood's social rituals made him a curiosity and, to some, a threat. Crestwood Pines was ruled by the Crestwood Pines Homeowners Association, a council led by Deborah Langley, a woman in her early 50s whose polished demeanor hid a fierce need to maintain control. Deborah had lived in the community for 15 years, her life a carefully curated display of order, her roses flawless, her social calendar packed, her influence unchallenged. She saw herself as the architect of Crestwood Pines' prestige, and any deviation from her vision was a personal insult. To her, rules were sacred, and those who didn't obey them didn't belong. Deborah's pride was the Crestwood Sentinels, a volunteer patrol of residents who roamed the neighborhood in branded golf carts, wearing reflective vests and calling themselves HOA cops. Their mission was to enforce the HOA's bylaws, catching kids playing too loudly, finding residents for unapproved paint colors, and reporting suspicious activity. The Sentinels were Deborah's enforcers, and none were more zealous than Roger Klein, a retired accountant with a penchant for confrontation and a deep-seated distrust of anyone who didn't fit his idea of a proper neighbor. Jeremiah had no patience for the HOA's micromanagement. His property was his own, paid for with years of hard work, and he saw no need to bow to Deborah's demands for conformity. He ignored their newsletters about approved landscaping and skipped their mandatory meetings, preferring to spend his time mentoring young activists or tending his wildflowers. His independence irked Deborah, who'd drive by his house during her patrols, her eyes narrowing at the untamed garden that defied her vision of uniformity. To her, Jeremiah was a challenge to her authority, a puzzle she was determined to solve. Trouble began on a crisp September morning. Jeremiah was walking through the community park, a quiet green space at the heart of Crestwood Pines. He'd taken to morning strolls to clear his mind, his phone tucked away, his thoughts on an upcoming education bill. The park was empty save for a few squirrels darting across the grass, and Jeremiah savored the solitude, pausing to admire a cluster of late-blooming asters. He didn't notice the Sentinel cart creeping along the path until it stopped beside him, its engine humming. Roger Klein stepped out, flanked by a woman named Cynthia, her clipboard clutched like a shield. "Excuse me," Roger said, his tone sharp. "What are you doing here?" Jeremiah turned, his expression calm but curious. "Just walking. It's a public park." Cynthia's eyes narrowed, her pen poised over her clipboard. "We've had reports of loitering. This is a private community. Do you live here?" Jeremiah's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice steady. "Yes, I live on Maple Drive. I'm Jeremiah Ellis." Roger smirked, crossing his arms. "You don't look familiar. Got any ID?" The question stung, a reminder of countless encounters Jeremiah had faced over the years, moments when his skin color prompted suspicion rather than respect. He took a deep breath, reaching for his wallet. "I'm a state senator. I've lived here 2 years. I'm not loitering." Cynthia scribbled something, her lips pursed. "We'll need to verify that. You're causing concern wandering around like this." "Concern?" Jeremiah said. his voice low but edged with steel. "I'm walking in my own neighborhood." Roger stepped closer, his voice loud enough to carry. "Don't get smart. We're keeping this place safe. If you're not supposed to be here, we'll have you removed." The confrontation ended abruptly when a jogger passed by, breaking the tension. Jeremiah walked home, his heart pounding not with fear, but with a quiet rage. That afternoon, a letter arrived from the HOA accusing him of unauthorized presence in the park and demanding he cease disruptive behavior or face fines and legal action. The letter was absurd. Jeremiah had every right to be in the park, and his position as a senator made the accusation laughable. But the intent was clear: to humiliate, to intimidate, to remind him he wasn't welcome. He drove to the HOA office the next day, the letter in hand. Deborah was there, her smile as thin as a blade. "Senator Ellis," she said, her voice dripping with false warmth, "this is a misunderstanding, but we have rules. Residents are concerned about strangers in the park." "Strangers?" Jeremiah said, his eyes locking on hers. "I've lived here 2 years. I've served this state for 9. You're accusing me of trespassing in my own community." Deborah shrugged, unruffled. "We're protecting our residents. If you can't respect that, we'll have to escalate." Jeremiah left, his mind racing. He pulled out his property deed, his voter registration, even his Senate ID, every document proving his place in Crestwood Pines. He sent copies to the HOA, expecting the matter to be dropped. Instead, a second letter arrived, this one threatening a $2,000 fine for repeated violations and hinting at community sanctions. The harassment escalated. The Sentinels began tailing Jeremiah, their carts circling his house at all hours. They'd park across the street, snapping photos as he watered his wildflowers or read on his porch. Roger would lean out, shouting, "Still causing trouble, Ellis?" Neighbors started avoiding him, their smiles replaced by wary glances. At the HOA's monthly meeting, Deborah painted Jeremiah as a troublemaker, a man exploiting his supposed status to flout rules. "He's disrupting our peace," she told the crowd, her voice trembling with feigned concern. Most residents nodded, their fear of outsiders outweighing their curiosity about Jeremiah's truth. But not everyone bought the narrative. Aisha Thompson, a 30-year-old journalist who'd moved to Crestwood Pines 6 months ago, had met Jeremiah at a local charity event. She'd been struck by his humility, the way he listened to her ideas about community reform. At the HOA meeting, Aisha stood up, her arms crossed. "Have you checked his credentials?" she asked Deborah. "He's a state senator. You're accusing a public servant of loitering." Deborah's smile tightened. "We're addressing resident concerns, Ms. Thompson. Let's not exaggerate." Aisha wasn't convinced. She visited Jeremiah the next day, bringing a thermos of tea. "They're targeting you," she said, sitting on his porch. "This isn't about rules, it's personal. What can I do?" Jeremiah sighed, his eyes tracing the wildflowers. "Just tell the truth, Aisha. That's all I've ever asked." The HOA's campaign grew vicious. Flyers appeared around the neighborhood, warning of a suspicious individual causing public disturbances. Someone keyed Jeremiah's car, leaving a note that read, "Go back where you came from." Late at night, he'd hear footsteps near his fence, followed by the clatter of bottles tossed into his yard. Each incident tested his resolve, but Jeremiah refused to bend. He hired a lawyer, a fierce woman named Carla, who specialized in discrimination cases. Carla warned that the HOA was likely fabricating complaints to justify their actions, banking on Jeremiah's race to paint him as a threat. "They're counting on you giving up," Carla said. "They think you're too busy, too tired to fight." Jeremiah's jaw tightened. "They don't know me." The breaking point came on a chilly November evening. Jeremiah was in the park, walking slowly to ease the stress of a long week. The air was crisp, the stars bright overhead. He didn't notice the Sentinel cart until it screeched to a halt, its headlights blinding him. 3 Sentinels, led by Roger, stepped out, their faces twisted with anger. "You're done, Ellis," Roger shouted, pointing at him. "You're loitering again. Sheriff's on the way to haul you out." Jeremiah stood tall, his voice calm but firm. "This is a public park. I'm a resident. You're overstepping." Roger laughed, stepping closer. "You're nobody here. Keep playing your senator card and we'll see who wins." What Roger didn't know was that Aisha had been nearby, jogging with her phone in hand. She'd grown wary of the Sentinels' tactics and had started documenting their patrols. Now she hit record, capturing every word. As Roger loomed over Jeremiah, Aisha stepped forward, her voice cutting through the night. "Back off," she said, holding up her phone. "This is going viral if you don't leave." Roger froze, his face paling. The other sentinels hesitated, their bravado crumbling. Before anyone could respond, a sheriff's cruiser pulled up, its lights flashing. Sheriff Daniels, a man who'd worked with Jeremiah on state safety initiatives, stepped out. He took one look at the scene and shook his head. "Roger, what the hell are you doing?" Daniels asked, his tone sharp. "He's loitering," Roger stammered, pointing at Jeremiah. "He's a problem." Daniels sighed, pulling out his notepad. "Jeremiah Ellis is a state senator and a resident. I've got his address on file. You're the ones causing trouble." The Sentinels retreated, muttering excuses as they piled into their cart. Aisha uploaded the video to X that night, titling it, "Fake HOA Cops Harass State Senator." By morning, it had millions of views, with comments flooding in from constituents, activists, and even fellow senators. Hashtags like Justice for Jeremiah and Crestwood Shame trended, drawing national attention. News outlets descended on Crestwood Pines, interviewing Jeremiah, who shared his story with quiet dignity, his service, his roots, and the harassment he'd endured. Deborah tried to spin the narrative, issuing a statement claiming the HOA had been misinformed about Jeremiah's status. But the damage was done. Residents, embarrassed by the spotlight, began questioning her leadership. A petition to disband the Sentinels gained thousands of signatures. Aisha organized a town hall at the community center, where Jeremiah spoke to a packed room. He stood at the podium, his voice steady as he addressed the crowd. "I didn't come here to fight," he said, his eyes sweeping the room. "I came to rest, to live. But you can't build a community by tearing people down. You judged me before you knew me. That's not safety. That's fear." The room erupted in applause, even from those who'd believed Deborah's lies. Deborah, cornered by the outrage, resigned as HOA president, her reputation in tatters. The HOA issued a formal apology and dropped all accusations against Jeremiah, even offering to fund a community garden in his name. But Jeremiah declined the gesture, asking instead for a public commitment to inclusivity. In the months that followed, Crestwood Pines transformed. The Sentinels were dissolved, replaced by a neighbor-led council focused on unity, not enforcement. Aisha and other residents helped Jeremiah expand his wildflower garden, turning it into a community space where kids played and families gathered. Jeremiah, once a stranger, became a mentor, his porch a place for honest conversations about race, trust, and healing. As spring bloomed in Crestwood Pines, Jeremiah sat in his rocking chair, watching the wildflowers sway. The neighborhood felt different, not a fortress of rules, but a place where people saw each other, not just their fears. He'd faced the storm with the same resolve that had carried him through decades of service, not with anger, but with truth. And in doing so, he'd changed a community that had forgotten what it meant to be neighbors.